most often people make mistakes on is treating it as spam and treating it as a spray and pray approach where if I do this 1,000 times, I'm going to get, X amount of placements.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AI SEO Insider podcast. I'm Chris Raulf, and this podcast cuts through the AI hype. I talk with people getting real results. Today's guest is someone whose platform has become essential to how we build EEAT here at Chris Raulf AI SEO and my boutique AI SEO agency called Boulder SEO Marketing. Brett Farmiloe. Am I saying your last name correct, Brett?
No, Chris, you butchered it. It's Farmiloe.
Farmiloe. Oh my God, I guess I should.
It's all good. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brett Farmiloe is the founder of Featured.com and CEO of Help a Reporter Out, HARO. Featured and HARO connect expert sources with journalists. Brett previously founded and ran a digital marketing company for 10 years before leading it to a successful acquisition. He's a published author, dad of 3, and once helped the actor Hugh Jackman launch a coffee company that was acquired by Keurig. Full disclosure, I was an early adopter back when Featured was still called Turkle, and we've built an entire team process around your platform. Brett, I mentioned that. Brett, welcome to the show. Did I miss anything about you?
I think you nailed it. So good to be here.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, tell us a little bit more very briefly about the venture with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I mean, look, love some coffee. So just kind of stumbled into that opportunity and took it from 0 to 1. And ultimately, one day I was shopping with my kids at Costco and saw Laughing Man coffee on the shelves. It was pretty cool just to be a part of it behind the scenes, see the impact that an A-list celebrity can have on a brand, and also measuring the impact that PR has. What's the difference between being on Rachel Ray versus the Chew, and how does that impact e-commerce sales? So it was a really fun time. My tweet deck was blowing up with tweets back in the day, and good learning lesson.
Awesome. I listened to a bunch of your podcast interviews, and then my team helped me put together a lot of questions and notes here. I read that there's a horoscope that triggered leaving corporate accounting. Did I pick that up correctly? And what's the story behind that?
I'm not sure if it was a horoscope, but I got my career start as a financial auditor, and I lasted about 10 months. And one day I was walking down the stairwell from the 9th floor down to the 3rd floor, and I took the stairwell so that it would take longer instead of taking the elevator, and got down to that last step. And I just looked up and I was like, man, I hate my job. And it kind of echoed through the thing. And there was a voice that came down from someone who was in the stairwell, and they're like, why don't you just quit? And so I ended up doing that, and then started a career education website that sent me and my 3 friends around the country in RVs interviewing people about their career paths. And it was kind of a good exit from financial accounting, but also a really, really strong foundation that any SEO nerd can resonate with all the metrics that influence decisions.
Awesome. Actually, I have a similar story where it was like long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, I read my horoscope. I don't believe in horoscopes, but it said, if you don't make a change today, you'll regret it forever. Took a shower, got out of the shower, wrote my letter of resignation, and started my business. Similar kind of experience.
So it's that first step. You got to take it.
Man, all in. And, I had money, I think for 2 months, was profitable after a month. And that's been a long time ago. I don't regret anything. All right. So by the way, this is not an infomercial for Featured, nor do I get paid or anything from you. I'm a massive fan of Featured. I was an early adopter. I went back through my email, and I think we initially connected when you were still running the company as Turkle back in 22, maybe. So when I speak at conferences, I speak globally at conferences about AI, SEO, GEO, and all that good stuff. I mention your platform, Featured.com, and another platform as 2 things that people can implement right away, right? Just to give people that are listening to the podcast an example, if you do a search in Google for the search term AI SEO expert, you're going to find my personal website, the Chris Rupp website, at the very top or near the top in Google. Thanks to Featured. I'd be happy to talk more about how we use Feature in a different podcast. But I definitely, your platform helps me get a lot of exposure. And then also, if you do a search for my name, Chris Raulf, in Google, I think Featured is the third or fourth platform listed in the blue links in Google associated with my name. So I have a team that constantly updates my personal profile on Featured. Again, probably do a standalone SEO tip on how to use Featured in the future. Brett, let's get into this. Why don't we talk about how you made the leap that most agency owners only dream about? The bedroom office to 500 clients story. What was Marketor's, and I hope I say that correctly, and what problem were you solving? Take us back to before you started Featured.
Yeah. So I was a freelancer for 5 years. And during the course of those 5 years, I got marketers.com to rank on the first page of Google for the term digital marketing company.
Yep.
And when I started to rank on page one for that, I got calls from all over the world for people who needed digital marketing services. Eventually, I got tired of telling people no and went from that sixth client to that seventh client. And to get to that 6 to 7, you needed that first W-2 employee to come in and help. Over the course of the next 5 years, we serviced over 500 small businesses. We had about 20, 25 employees. And ultimately, the problem that I kept seeing over and over and over again is how hard it is to take a small business and get them featured in the media. And that's necessary so that you can build your authority and essentially outrank other competitors in search engine results. And so started a platform called Turkle and decided to spin that out separately from the company and sell the agency at the end of 21 to focus on Turkle full time in January of 22. I rebranded it to Featured.com in July of 23. And then we acquired and revived Help a Reporter Out in April of 25. And so today, what Featured and Help a Reporter Out do is essentially level the playing field for anyone to share their expertise and their knowledge and have those insights be featured in articles with attribution back to the person and to the website that they represent.
Yeah. So people in my space, they still obsess about backlinks, right? They pay a ton of money sometimes for backlinks. I found that I'm getting published a ton through your platform. And man, I'm getting cited in extremely high domain authority publications in roundups. So to me, again, it's the easiest way to build an incredible backlink profile. And it's relatively inexpensive. To be honest. Kudos, you're doing an incredible job with your platform.
Well, it's just like you go back to the problem of you're running a business and you've got an abundance of knowledge about your business, but you don't really have an outlet to share it. And that's what makes, I think, Featured and, Help a Reporter Out really powerful platforms is you're able to kind of set those alerts and then you're able to show up as yourself and share the stuff that you're super knowledgeable about and, be able to get rewarded for that. So it's a critical part for building visibility online to be in front of your customers. That visibility equation has changed pretty dramatically, the last few years where all of a sudden, you're going to someone like Chris and you want AI visibility and LLMs. And how do you do that? And it's something that we're consistently seeing earned media play a critical part of.
Absolutely. So you had 500 small business clients with tons of knowledge, but no way to get visibility, right? My team and I at BSM, Bold Marketing, were dealing with the same stuff. How did that frustration become a product? When was the first time that you actually think about, hey, I want to create a SaaS business? Walk us through that process.
Well, I think it was just like, how do you build backlinks at scale? And how do you do that, consistently, no matter what, for any kind of SMB? The commonality, again, you have knowledge about your business. You don't have anywhere to share it. So we just built a platform that allowed us to do that. And the platform itself was really difficult because we would curate questions to ask certain clients, and then you would need to make that usable and interesting for publishers to actually feature. So what we found was if you could pair your client up with other interesting subject matter experts, collectively, you've got a really interesting piece of content that a publisher is going to be interested in featuring on their website. And so we didn't have all the other interesting subject matter experts, so we had to go recruit those folks. And ultimately, we just needed a platform out of necessity to have a streamlined process to create this content at scale. And so that's when we essentially launched a platform, and then saw that a lot of people were getting a lot of value out of it. So decided to charge for it. And then we were probably at like, I don't know, like 3,000 a month in recurring revenue with Turkle, when we're like, okay, let's go all in on this and let's sell the agency and let's focus on the SaaS. So all out of necessity.
Wow. Was it fully self-funded? Can you talk a little bit more about the process of making that leap? I mean, I know it's a hard decision sometimes, right? And money plays a big role. Just very briefly, how did you go about that, and how many people now work at Featured?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good playbook in terms of any agency that has like a SaaS type of product, where if you're able to build and take a lot and de-risk the SaaS while you're at the agency, that's a really good way to fund and grow a SaaS and get through that hard 0 to 1 type of place. And so that's what we did, is we essentially were able to build the platform with the current team that we had. We were able to generate some revenue and get a little bit of traction, and then start those investor conversations a little bit before we actually sold the agency. We raised a round of capital about 6 months into it, so June of 22. So we're venture backed today, still really a small, mighty team of 7. Half of
Oh,
are
wow.
software engineers, and the other half are product managers and customer support and partnerships folks. So we've maintained that team size for a pretty long time. We're AI first, so a lot of the workflows that we have are AI either powered or assisted. That's allowed us to now service hundreds of thousands of experts who use the platform.
Awesome. Can you, two-part question. Can you briefly talk about featured.ai? And then, was featured.com actually available? How much did the domain change actually matter?
Yeah, so we don't have featured.ai, we have featured.com, and we have a product called Featured AI.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
what Featured AI does is it builds a personal knowledge base about yourself. So taking all the different content that you've written, podcasts that you've done, things like that, builds a personalized knowledge base that identifies relevant media opportunities and drafts a suggested answer that you could edit and put over the finish line and submit to a journalist or publication. And so the problem that we see with Featured is that small business owners are really busy. They don't have the time to necessarily monitor all the different media opportunities, think about what they're going to say to a journalist. And so Featured AI does all that for you and puts you on third base so you can take it across the finish line.
And we love that Featured, by the way. Hey, let's switch gears real quick. Let's talk about HARO. Can you, to those of, who are listening right now who don't know what HARO is, what is it? Why did you bring it back?
Yeah. HARO is a 3 times a day newsletter that summarizes different requests from journalists, puts those into an email, and allows you to reply directly to the journalist if you could be helpful for their story. So we'll get, on average, about 20 to 30 different requests for every edition. So we have those 3 editions, so close to like 75 to 100 requests a day from journalists who need sources for their stories. And we'll field those requests, we'll put those into the email and send the same email out to 100,000 plus subscribers every single day, 3 times a day. It was started in 2008. It was sold in 2010. It was ran until April 24 when it was rebranded to a platform called Connectively. And Connectively was discontinued in December of 24. And that's when I reached out to say, hey, would you be interested in selling it? So we were able to put a deal across the finish line and then revived the original form of HARO, which I felt was really important because HARO had product market fit. People love email in the journalism and publisher space. And so just revived that brand. And it's been very much like turning on a light switch and seeing everyone use it again.
Yeah, it's a great job. Thank you for doing that. When you talk about HARO, I think you talk about the spam problem. You mentioned that 21% of pitches are now 100% AI generated. How are you actually detecting and filtering this? Is that still possible?
Yeah, part of the reason why HARO was discontinued originally was around factors of quality and trust. Because HARO's so accessible, it made it so that the pitches that were being sent to journalists were no longer that valuable. It was very easy to spam the platform, and the resources just weren't going into it to maintain that quality and trust. And so that was core objective number one for us when we revived the brand, was we needed to restore that quality and trust that people once enjoyed. And so part of the things that we did was around AI detection. So AI detection was one of the core principles that we implemented, where every single pitch that goes through HARO goes through an AI detection process. We use Pangram as our AI detection tool, and we're confident in saying that because if you go to pangram.com, homepage says AI detection that actually works. And in our experience, it's been the most reliable AI detection tool on the market. And so we're able to essentially quantify an AI detection score, present that to journalists, and now they can go in and essentially see, okay, should I rely on this insight? What additional work is required on my end to verify that this is a legitimate source and these are legitimate insights? So just trying to equip journalists with everything that they need so that they could get connected with the right sources.
So dashboard only approach versus email sort of like an antiquated technology. Is that still what journalists appreciate the most, or are you going to eventually move to a dashboard only approach?
So HARO will remain the same because I think that it's got the product market fit that's really rare to achieve. The thing that makes HARO magical isn't necessarily that it's in email. It's the fact that you as a journalist can get connected with almost anyone on the planet for a story. It's because there's not sign-up friction, because there's not all this different stuff that makes it hard to get connected with the journalist. It's email. The recipients can get this email or request from a journalist, forward it to the right person. That person can get connected with the journalist, and these journalists have tremendous network effects to help with their stories. That's what makes HARO magical. But with Featured, it isn't a platform. And what makes Featured really interesting and unique is the fact that it solves those problems of, I don't have enough time to monitor everything. I don't have enough, media opportunities to actually act on. Featured can help with a lot of the media or the monitoring aspect, and then ultimately use the power of a platform to make it really easy for you to submit. So I think that that's what we're seeing on both sides, and the two brands work really well together.
Awesome. Let's talk about what journalists actually need, about your firsthand insights from talking to journalists daily. And by the way, Brett, would you consider yourself a journalist yourself? How do you see yourself? What is your role these days in this world?
I think that I'm a founder and CEO, and I also contribute content to a variety of media outlets. And oftentimes what I find is that I need to flip-flop being in both roles. I need to be able to quote unquote dog food the product. And so I'll frequently go in and make requests as a journalist in HARO and actually produce stories for outlets like Inc. and Fast Company and others. And I'll actually hop on, I'll interview different sources for stories and produce it like I was a journalist. I feel like that's been really valuable for me in order to recognize what our customers are seeing on both sides. And at the same time, I'll use Featured all the time to submit insights for questions and queries that I feel like I'm qualified for, and see what the experience is like to actually get in articles.
Awesome. Let's talk about the two hands up story. You ask journalists how many income sources they have, and they hold up 8 to 10 fingers, according to my research. What does a typical journalist's day actual look like?
Yeah. So when we acquired Help a Reporter Out, I wanted to dive in and have as many user interviews as possible with journalists. And the thing that became pretty apparent quickly was how many sources of income journalists need to rely on to make a living today. And journalists are typically writing for 5 different publications. They might have a Substack. They might have an hourly consulting rate. They've got a course that they're selling, a book that they're selling, all these different things. And so very quickly, we're like, wow, there's many different ways that reporters can be helped out besides source requests. And where we arrived is actually creating HARO journalist profiles that give journalists the flexibility to promote the things that they want to promote. So we just actually launched that a month ago, where HARO now has journalist profiles. You can, almost like in a WordPress drag and drop type of widget, you could put in a widget of buy me a coffee. You could put in your hourly consulting rate. And people can book consultations directly through their profile. You could highlight the work that you're doing in a portfolio. You have an open to write badge that signals to the market that you would be willing to take on additional assignments. And so we wanted to really position that web page for journalists as a way to help amplify their income streams and make the work that they do, allowing them to continue to do the work that they actually do.
Awesome. Very cool. Let's talk about the empathy gap. Why do so many PR people and agencies still get this wrong after decades of being told to stop spamming?
I think it's this maybe echo chamber in terms of it's a numbers game, and maybe it's the conditioning that maybe if you did treat it as a numbers game and you did score a couple great placements, that you should continue to do the numbers game aspect. I think that any true seasoned PR professional who's been in the game for decades will tell you that it's about relationships, and it's about being able to have a journalist who trusts you. And whenever a new client comes on or you've got some news that is newsworthy, it's being able to have a two-way street of saying, going to that journalist who trusts you and you trust them to say, here's what's happening, wanted to put it on your radar. And so the thing that most often people make mistakes on is treating it as spam and treating it as a spray and pray approach, where if I do this 1,000 times, I'm going to get, X amount of placements. And in reality, I think that the best agencies who are getting success out of Featured and Help Reporter Out are using it to develop relationships and earn true media based off of that approach.
Yeah. So, changing definition of journalist, as we just talked about. Right now, we have YouTubers, Substackers, newsletter writers who also write for mainstream outlets. How should we think about this profession globally? How are we going to quality control? Like, how do really high quality people surface to the top? Is that something that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's maybe not on us as much as it is readers selecting where readers, viewers, consumers deciding where they're going to get their news from. And so I think that those winners will naturally gravitate, and the market will dictate who the new creators are and who the new journalists are as well. And us as a platform, it's no secret that where and how people want to be featured in 2026 has drastically changed. So I think that there's a lot of movement, to say the least, in the landscape. And our job as a platform is try to keep up with that pace to surface different media opportunities where people are interested in pursuing. And so I think that you're seeing a lot of experimentation here in 2026, where people are experimenting with podcasts, with newsletter pitching, with Substack appearances and things like that. Tried and true, earned media isn't changing in the sense that you still need visibility with your customers. It's just where your customers actually hanging out.
Awesome. Last question on this in this section topic, a relationship question. So back in 2008, PR people took journalists to lunch. You mentioned journalists are too time strapped for that now. Has relationship building fundamentally changed, or just the tactics?
Look, I think it would be pretty shocking today if you put in a phone call to a journalist and ask them to lunch. That shock value would be so high that they actually might say yes. I think that, at the core, journalists have been busy. They've been busy for decades because they're on to their next story. And if you want to focus on building a relationship, you better deliver value first. I think that that's probably the most reliable tactic, is if you're able to be helpful for them and to have reliable information that's timely, and actually help them do their job. That's the first step to build any kind of relationship. So rather than asking a journalist out to lunch, you got to be able to prove why you're worth the time of doing lunch with.
What a crazy concept to actually meet in person, right? Cool. Let's talk about the EEAT connection and why Featured matters for AI era SEO. I think there's a Featured confidence score. You've built an internal metric for quantifying digital authority. How does it work, and what signals does it track?
You know what? Not sure what the confidence score actually is. I know that just to lift the hood a little bit on what happens at Featured. So a journalist or a publication will ask a question. We'll invite vetted experts to answer that question. And then through all the different submissions, we'll run an analysis to figure out which recommendations we would pass back over to the journalist and publisher to look at. So there's a variety of different signals that we will look at to make those recommendations. A lot of it's going to be based on the experience and the expertise of the individual who's answering. So if you look at things like job title, which job titles are actually required to answer this question? Is this a question about human resources where the chief human resources officer is going to be the best point of contact, or is it a talent acquisition type of topic and you're going to go lower level to like a recruiter or a TA person? So I think that there's the job title, there's the company aspect where if a company is really well known about a certain topic, maybe it doesn't matter as much if the job title isn't an exact match. So there's certain signals like that go to the expert, type of category. And then what's the person actually saying? And how does it stack up in comparison to all the other different submissions that have come through to the journalists? Is it experience that's AI generated? Is it a step above that that's actually earned experience through life? And so we're trying to make all those different determinations through an analysis, and it's very much through the lens of EEAT.
Okay, so my personal own experience, we've been using Featured heavily daily for myself. Within, I think, 6 to 8 months, my EEAT score is through the roof, right? I can measure from back in the day, less than a year ago when I published content, to now how fast the content associated with me ranks. I mean, it's insane. I kid you not. Sometimes within 24 hours, my content will rank on page 1 for the keywords. So I can say since we've been using Featured for me and also our clients, we've seen a dramatic boost in rankings. That's just a factual statement. Let's talk about expert roundup articles versus bylined articles. When should someone use each format?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that it depends on the publisher. It depends on what type of content's going to resonate with their audience. And so we're seeing that certain publications are thinking more and more about the distribution of their content. How does that content get visibility in an area where search traffic's declining and AI is kind of like a unknown? How do you get reliable traffic? And so expert roundups are still a pretty tried and true way to do that, where if you feature 10 people in an article that are all qualified to comment on a particular topic, and you notify them that they've been featured, how many of those folks are going to share to social media and start to drive some referral traffic? So I think that it very much depends on the publisher, their objectives, their readership, and what value that an author can provide to them, if that is a single author with a unique perspective, or whether that's 10 experts that want to go deep on a certain topic.
Awesome. Last question in this section, the first person pronoun research. You've mentioned studies showing correlation between I, we, my usage and ranking success. What's the insight here?
Without knowing which research really we're talking about, I think it goes back to that lens of EEAT, of if you've got commentary that's signed off and attributable to a reputable expert, and that reputable expert is using words like maybe I, we, my, me, then it's talking about firsthand experience, and that's the first letter in the EEAT acronym, is you're talking about the experience aspects. So, I'm not too familiar with the research. I don't know if this works or not, but I know that if EEAT is a thing, then experience is something that goes one step beyond what AI could generate, and that's important.
Awesome. As you can tell, we've done a ton of research and asked my team to help me out with questions here.
Yeah, you know more than me.
Hey, let's talk about AI's impact on digital PR and media. So sadly, there are now local news deserts, right? And now AI is I think a big part. You've talked about using AI to monitor municipality records and create local news coverage based on our research. What's the vision here?
Yeah, I'm actually long-term optimistic on local news because of how effective AI can actually be in monitoring all these different raw, unstructured sets of data. So if you look at municipality records, city council meetings, police reports, all these different signals for a local city, AI is much more effective than a journalist in covering all those different signals, because AI doesn't care how mundane going through every single police report is going to be. They're going to do it. And then if there's something that's worth surfacing that is newsworthy, now that could go to a human editor for review and then ultimate publications. I think that like AI is really going to resurrect a lot of these local news deserts. You're already seeing that. Microsoft's actually leading a charge where I think that they launched like 200 local news sites in conjunction with a few different partnerships. And I think that that's really important. Obviously, it's not great to have no news on the local level. And now AI actually might amplify that and make it more economical and easier to execute. So I'm really excited on that front.
Yeah, so the irony, right? Your platform fights AI spam while using AI in production to a certain level. How do you think about that tension? Is that something that's going to keep you up at night on how you're going to address that in the future?
No, I think that it's very much on par with how we're approaching things at Featured, which is as long as you keep a human in the loop, then it doesn't really matter that the first draft was AI. And I think that that's also a sentiment that's echoed for journalists. There's two different camps of journalists that care if something's AI generated or if it's not. For us, I think it's about putting it in front of a person and having that person be the ultimate decision maker on whether or not to press publish, and what edits, more importantly, are needed before they press publish. So for us, we know that if time is one of the biggest constraints of experts sharing expertise online, then what's more important? Like putting it in front of an expert that's initially AI generated to allow them to review, or not getting that expertise at all. So I think that's the ultimate question that's going to be asked by publishers is like, okay, is it worth not having this content? Or is it worth having this content even though it was initially generated by AI, and then reviewed by a person and then put across the finish line?
Yeah. So at my agency, Bold SEO Marketing, my goal is to deploy agents for about 80% of everything that we do, all the processes, right? So that's the A2A question for the media. What happens when AI agents start sourcing experts for other AI agents? Have you thought about that? Like, how do you deal with that situation?
I think it's going to be a beautiful reality. Like if you put yourself in the shoes of a journalist for a second and you put out a HARO, you go on Featured and make a request, your inbox is blown up. Like there are a lot of different responses to go through, and there's a lot of different things to source and vet and set up interviews and things like that. Imagine an agent doing all that. Like imagine your journalist agent is talking with your expert agent, determining if the two should sync up so that the ultimate value, which is literally getting on a Zoom call with the expert to ask the exact questions and explore the creativity around a certain topic. What if a journalist could just spend their day doing that? What if a source could just spend their day showing up with the journalist in a publication that they want to get featured in? And so I think that that's like optimistic view of how agents can interact on both sides of the equation, so that ultimately you could just show up and drive value in the area that matters most.
I can agree more. All right, next section, practical advice for agencies and business owners. How to actually use these platforms effectively. So common mistakes, right? What do you see people doing wrong on featured.com and HARO that tanks their success rate?
I think it's if you look at success rate, it's the number of publications and then the number of submissions. And so we talked about how the mentality and the temptation is to treat this like a numbers game. And what we see from people who treat it like a numbers game versus the people who treat it from a very specific, I'm going to reply to this because I know that I'm absolutely the best person in the world to answer this, really high success rate from those folks. We typically see some really selective PR firms do this, where we will not see a submission in an entire month. And it doesn't mean that they're not using the platform. It means that they're withholding from acting on an opportunity until they recognize that this is A, the best fit for my client, and B, the best fit for this publication. So I think that it's just being very selective and acting on the ones that you are a true expert on.
Follow-up question on this. Time investment reality, and I can share what we do with my team here, but how much time should someone realistically budget for reactive PR via these platforms?
We've worked really, really hard to reduce this because we know that it's the bottleneck. No one has the amount of time to go through 3 HAROs a day, to log into Featured every single day and to press refresh on a browser to look and see what new media opportunities exist. And so we've worked really hard to use AI to allow you to reduce that time upwards of like 95%. So that all you've got to do is when you get an email from Featured, it's going to have the media opportunity that we think you're the best fit for. It's not going to be a summary of all the different requests on our platform. It's going to say, hey, Chris, this is the one. This is the one. Here's the publication that we think that you'd be interested in based off the criteria that you've set. Here's the question that we think you're an expert on. And here's the drafted response that we want you to just make some light edits on and submit. And so we've tried to really streamline that workflow so that anyone with expertise can show up and have it be beneficial and easy to share that expertise.
Awesome. So we're a small agency, I think 40, 50 clients maybe. We have a team now of 3 that work with Featured, and I think it's an add-on for, clients that pay a little bit more for us to manage Featured. It works insanely well. What patterns do you see from agencies that do it well versus poorly? Do you get that kind of feedback? Any insights into that?
Yeah, I mean, we designed this for agencies. It was a
Yeah.
solution for my agency. It's a solution for others. And typically the pattern that we see is an agency will sign up for the free plan where you get 3 submissions a month at no cost, and they'll have the founder be the profile that they answer on behalf of. That founder usually finds success. They upgrade to one of the paid plans with 1 seat, and they continue to do it for their agency to grow it and scale it. And then they're able to talk confidently about the results that their agency is getting from Featured, and they roll it out to their other clients. And so that's the pattern that we typically see is sign up for the free plan, upgrade to the paid, onboard the clients, and then really structure those workflows in a way that's going to produce profitability for the agency.
Last question in this section. Beyond, I got quoted in Forms or replace that with another publication. What should people actually track? What's a good way to track success?
I think that that's a really hard question to answer because it depends on the objective. Like what is success to start with? Like, I think that every PR firm has a client that is going to have a different definition of success, and that definition only comes through a conversation with the client. So if you've got like a senior home in Boca Raton and you're like, a success for us would be getting a publication in Detroit, in Canada, in New York, where the target buyer resides and reads, so that they could send their parents at Boca Raton for a senior living. That's success. And so I think it really just goes to the objective. And then in terms of quantifying it, I think it ultimately comes down to leads and sales always, and what kind of revenue is being driven from this. And so if you're able to attach certain metrics to that success metric, then that's where it at least starts. But it's a messy space. Like, I think that I saw a Reddit thread that was like a PR person saying that 40% of their job is proving that they did their job.
Yeah. So I want to be mindful of your time. You gave me an hour. Let's tackle the last section here. Forward-looking predictions. I got a couple of questions for you. Your predictions on AI agents and sourcing when AI systems need expert input, where do they go? Will Featured become training data?
Well, I think that you mentioned something interesting earlier about how your personal profile and Featured ranks really well in search, and it's like one of the top results. That's a good sign and good indicator, because if the future actually looks like an agentic one where a journalist has an agent that handles sourcing for them, then we would want Featured to be a place that agent visits and determines like, okay, I'm going to look at Featured's expert directory and I'm going to review in depth all the different sources that are in this directory, and I'm going to make recommendations for the 2 ones that we should feature in this publication. And so ultimately, like, wouldn't it be great if that journalist sourcing agent was able to talk to a Featured agent and essentially give them the information back to say confidently, you don't even have to put out a media request. just talk to Chris, talk to Joe, talk to Mary or whatever, and then handle it that way. So we'll see how the future unfolds. Like that seems like a pretty optimized future, and one that quite honestly levels the playing field for a lot of folks if they would just take that first step and, ultimately create that profile.
What's the future of the journalist profession, just like big picture, globally thinking?
I wish I was a little bit more optimistic in this. I think that the economics are really challenging traditional media and publications. And beyond the economics, like you got a lot of trust issues as well. I went to a journalist conference a couple months ago and it was pretty dire. Like, not gonna lie, sitting at those round tables and speaking with journalists and looking them in the eye and hearing about the future of the profession doesn't look great. I think to turn it, people are still going to get their news from somewhere, and it's going to be personalized. It's going to come from a variety of different sources, creates new opportunities for creators. In that sense, you also look at the market trends of what's happening with journalists and where they're going. A lot of them are going to corporate comms roles at brands with money. Wow, NVIDIA, now the new source of news for certain things. So I think that there's going to be a gravitation towards brands creating really good, compelling, interesting content. And that's going to fill the gap for a lot of publications just can't afford to create content at scale. I think that there's also going to be an opening up of contributed content where now publications, if they don't want AI generated content and they still have a human in the loop, now is that content, instead of AI generated, expert led created content, and experts now have just an abundance of opportunities to actually contribute their content and share knowledge in ways that's meaningful. So the future is weird.
No doubt. Hey, Brett, before we started recording, I mentioned our AI, SEO, and GEO online summit. I invited you. I think you're hopefully going to join us. I have a lot more questions. I'd love to tackle more of those questions in the panel that I invited you to. So I'm going to put the link to the online summit right below, free of charge. Anybody can attend. If you want to listen to people like Brett and other experts, make sure to sign up. Brett, I'll send you all the information and hopefully you'll be able to join us. Let's do a couple of rapid fire questions. Beer or wine?
I'm born and raised in Sonoma County, California, which is basically right next to Napa and one of the best places in the world, period, especially for wine.
Yeah.
I'm a wine guy.
Agree. All right. I'm a beer guy. Dogs or cats?
Yeah, I'm a proud owner of a Yorkie, so I'm going to go dog.
Nice. Beach or mountain?
Beach.
All right. Indian or Chinese food?
I don't discriminate on food, but North Indian, South Indian food, I'll probably go Indian.
Nice. HARO or Featured, if you had to choose?
The PC answer is that you don't choose your favorite kid, but I will say that HARO is such an excellent product market fit. It's at its potential, and Featured is got so much potential as a platform. I eat, sleep, breathe Featured. Featured is a really, really powerful platform for so many folks that could save them time to get featured in the media.
Sorry, that was not a fair question. Hey, Brett, this has been incredibly valuable, both the tactical stuff and the bigger picture thinking. Where can people find you, learn more about Featured and HARO, and connect with what you're building?
Yeah, call to action would be go to featured.com. You could sign up for a free plan and essentially set some alerts and see what kind of stuff lands in your inbox. I think that's a great place to start. Simultaneously, you can go to helpareporter.com and input your email address and subscribe for the HARO emails. And then you could find me on LinkedIn, Brett Farmiloe.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to hopefully having you on the AI, SEO, and GEO online summit. I think maybe we can do another interview in a year or so and see if journalism still exists or what has happened.
Pretty sure it will, hopefully. But thanks for having me on, Chris.
All right. Thanks so much, Brett.